My name is Jeff Morgan, and I'm going to be doing a few videos on the topic, whose fault was no-fault divorce? The story behind America's most enduring oxymoron. So, what is an oxymoron? There are two different types of oxymorons. One is an example, is a linguistic oxymoron, when you take two words that have opposite meanings, more or less, and you put them beside each other. Like, that person is pretty ugly. So is the person pretty or ugly? How about that person is ugly pretty? It doesn't make sense. Pretty ugly. How about positively no? Are you going tonight? Positively no. Positively usually means positively yes, but instead of positively no. That's a linguistic oxymoron. And then there are the sociological oxymorons. For example, when I was in the military, I was in military intelligence. And I have probably heard 100 times people telling me, military intelligence? Those two things are oxymorons. They don't go together. Be that as it may, I would like to suggest another oxymoron. Honest divorce attorney. Honest divorce attorney? That is an oxymoron for sure. Anyway, in this article about whose fault was no-fault divorce, done by Ryan McPherson, the story behind America's most enduring oxymoron, he talks about no-fault divorce as being an oxymoron. No-fault divorce. So you're getting divorced, but there's nobody's fault. Nobody's to blame for this divorce. It just happened. It just arose. A no-fault divorce just appeared out of the blue. Maybe you went to the Cabbage Patch and behold, there was a no-fault divorce. You went to the mailbox one day and behold, there's a no-fault divorce. Divorce just happened. There was no fault. It just happened. That is another oxymoron that really we have come to embrace in our society. We don't want to have anybody responsible for a divorce. They just couldn't work it out. The marriage was irretrievably broken. By whom? Well, we can't assign fault anywhere. This is no-fault America. So he's talking about the rise of no-fault divorce, because prior to 1969, there used to be the idea that if you wanted to get divorced, you actually had to have a reason for getting a divorce. So, for example, adultery was a big reason for getting a divorce. Cruelty, domestic violence, I believe abandonment, those were all different reasons for getting a divorce. But you had to go to a judge and you had to prove the reason you were getting a divorce. You could not go to a judge and say, "Judge, I want a divorce because I'm unhappy. I just am not happy in this marriage and I want a divorce. I want to find myself." The judge would have laughed you out of court. And now the thing with the fault-based divorce is that sometimes it created situations where you had a husband and wife who both wanted to mutually get divorced, and they would stage things. Like, say, for example, they would have a staged photo op where the man would supposedly go into a hotel with a person who was paid to act as if she was his mistress. And lo and behold, out of the blue, in would pop a private investigator hired by the wife, or maybe the husband, or both of them together, to catch him in the act with a snapshot that they could present to the court and say, "This is why our marriage is irretrievably broken. This is why we need a divorce." Of course, there's a lot of lying going on with that. So we've come to the decision that we do not want to have people lying in family court. Really? That's also an oxymoron, telling the truth in family court. Anyway, so now we have this thing called no-fault divorce. And no-fault divorce, really, what it means in America today is forced divorce. I can divorce my wife for any reason at all. I'm not happy today, I can get a divorce. She didn't cook me supper yesterday, I can get a divorce. I did not wash her car this week. Well, she can get a divorce from me. I did not help her with the laundry. That's a reason that she can get a divorce. All of these trivial things, and sometimes they're nonsensical. They have no meaning whatsoever. But if you go to the judge and you tell the judge that our marriage is insupportable, that there is a discord of personalities, the judge has to grant you a divorce in the state of Texas. It is mandated by the Texas Family Code. Many judges have told me, I can't make law from the bench. I have to implement law. The judge no longer has the ability to make a judicial decision to say, there's no standard here. You guys are not getting a divorce. The judge must enforce the divorce. It's an administrative trial. And the person who says, wait a minute, I don't want a divorce, tough. You don't get any say in the matter. The legislature has already determined that a divorce will be granted. Prior to no-fault divorce, you used to have a plaintiff, and a plaintiff would make a charge against a defendant. My wife would charge me with domestic violence. I would charge her with adultery, something like that. And we had to present proof before the judge, and based on the proof, he could grant the divorce. It wasn't automatic, but he could do so. We have changed those terms as well. It's no longer plaintiff and defendant. Oh, no, those terms are too mean. They create conflict. We can't have conflict in divorce. We have new terms. One is called now the petitioner. I am going to petition for divorce, and my spouse will be the respondent. Because now we can get divorced for any reason, for no reason. And by the way, it's just an administrative act. The judge has to sign off on it, period. The judge has no option but to sign off on it. Even if I'm doing all the wrong and I want a divorce because I'm cheating on my wife all over the place and she's not happy about it, I can sue her for divorce. And by the way, I may also get a lot of the assets. I may get my children. I get everything else along with it. This is the way divorce works in Texas. But what is the history of this no-fault divorce? So in California in 1969, the California Family Law Act of 1969 was passed. It was signed into law by Ronald Reagan, who later said this was one of the biggest mistakes, one of the biggest regrets he had from public life, that he signed this into being. And the history behind that, there was a congressman who wanted to get a divorce from his wife, but he did not want to have to lose all of his money because he was cheating, and he wanted to protect himself and keep his money and divorce his wife so that he could run off with his mistress. And he helped to create legislation which would allow for no-fault divorce. And he got his no-fault divorce, and 5 years after the no-fault divorce, I believe his wife was on food stamps because this congressman had to do something that would be very helpful for society. And this is the model that we followed. But prior to the California law, there was another country that actually tried no-fault divorce. And we have adopted their model by and large. Let's go back to the 1910s, 1920s in Bolshevik Russia. Vladimir Lenin pronounced that individuals should be free to divorce without cause. They should be free to divorce without mutual consent. They should be free to divorce even without having to inform their spouse. In other words, marriage was kind of looked upon as being a cohabiting relationship. There was nothing there to bind people together. Even though the church was responsible for the marriage, Vladimir Lenin said, we are going to change this because marriage is a bourgeois institution. In marriage, what happens, as Karl Marx would say, is that a man gets married and he now owns the woman and the reproductive rights of the woman and the labor of the woman. We must get rid of this bourgeois institution. So Vladimir Lenin decided that he was going to do so. Marriage was allowed to be dissolved by any person for any reason whatsoever. You didn't even have to inform your spouse. The Atlantic magazine wrote an article in 1926 about the no-fault divorce and about Russia abolishing marriage in the 1920s. And one of the things they said is that peasant boys used to look at marriage as a game. Every time there'd be a change of season, they would have a change of wives. Hey, why not? You know what? I'm done with her. I've had her for a few months, maybe a year. Let's try somebody else and see if things are a little bit more exciting. And you ended up with lots of heartbroken women. You ended up with a lot of homeless children. You ended up with abortion rates rising. You ended up with complete disintegration to society. You ended up with a lot of catastrophe and disaster. The Russians actually had a national debate about this issue of no-fault divorce. Not everybody was for it. They saw the destruction that was taking place. So as a brief history, in 1917, marriage was considered a bourgeois institution, and because men owned the women. 1918, divorces outnumbered marriages 5-1. For every one marriage, there were 5 divorces. 1926. Marriage is an exciting game. We can change wives with the changing of the seasons. It does not make a difference that the peasant boy who came in and said, hey, I've had my wife for a little bit of time here, and boy, she was nice, but I'm getting a little bit bored with her and I want to go pick up somebody else and see if there's any differences there, any little more fun that I can have. And he was able to just do that. You left broken-hearted women behind. You left women behind who were pregnant. You left children who were abandoned. Orphans became a huge issue. Children grown up without parents. Abortion increased. because, we must have free love in this wonderful communist paradise land called Bolshevik Russia. In the 1930s, the authorities in Russia started to realize that, we're having some problems here. This post-marital generation lacks social skills. Does this sound familiar? A post-marriage generation lacking social skills. Does it sound like America, perhaps? But they came to this conclusion really fast that maybe we have overstepped some things. Maybe we need to make some changes. So in 1944, there was some reform. They decided that there must be some type of marital breakdown for the prerequisite of divorce. So you could no longer just freely divorce. You could no longer just change your wives with the changing of the season. And maybe, women would do the same thing to the men. Hey, I like him for a while, but now I'm going to go try somebody else. This was no longer an issue. You had to show some type of prerequisite to get a divorce. In 1949, divorce was granted when the marriage might conflict with communist morality. So if you were in a marriage and you could determine that continuing in this marriage might conflict with communist morality, you could have a divorce. Now, it really wasn't a fault-based divorce. It was because you were obliged to serve the communist state. Still, it wasn't quite fault-based divorce. And they never really had what a fault-based divorce was. First off, they just eliminated marriage as an ecclesiastical and a civil institution. Then they saw the problems in society, and basically they kind of said, well, how do we backtrack to fix these problems? We'll have what we'll call a voluntary cohabitation. Now, they didn't call it that, but really that's exactly what it was. It was two people that would voluntarily, mutually cohabit with each other, and we'll kind of call it marriage. Come to the United States. The United States used to define marriage as two people, a man and a woman, coming together in a mutual union for life, and this was the environment to raise children, healthy families. Then something happened in the 1970s. We had the divorce attorneys and others who saw an opportunity to make some money and maybe promote the idea of free love. Remember the 1960s, we were the free love generation. We had Woodstock, we have other things. Free love. Marriage is such an obstacle to free love. And I want to have that free love, but I'm married. What can I do? We've got the perfect solution for you. It's called no-fault divorce. You can just get a divorce from your wife. In fact, we won't even call it divorce anymore. We're going to call it dissolution of marriage. And by the way, you don't have to present proof anymore. There were times, yes, you did have to present proof prior to this, but we don't want to have conflict. We just want to have forced divorce so that I, if I want to, can divorce my wife and find somebody else that I might be excited with, or she might do the same to me and find somebody else that might be a little bit richer, or maybe who doesn't have to work so hard. He has more time because he's retired and I'm working 50, 60 hours a week to support the family. So no-fault divorce threw out the prior standard that we used to hold in America, that a marriage was designed to bring two people together, and it was supposed to be a union for life, and the reason we had marriage was to protect the weaker spouse and to protect children. That is what we had. But the generation of free love, which by the way exists today in America, in 2019, 2018, we are a generation that believes we should have free love. We should have free choice. We should be able to abandon our spouse and our children at will. And really, you should not judge me for doing such a thing. So what we have done in America, we have taken the former style that was in Bolshevik Russia, and we have said this: you can divorce at will. No consent is necessary from your spouse. To quote Vladimir Lenin, individuals should be free to divorce without cause. They should be free to divorce without mutual consent, and they should be free to divorce without even informing their spouse. Bolshevik Russia in the early 19-teens and 1920s, and the United States of America today. But now we have to still convince people that somehow no-fault divorce is good. So now we come to the rationalists. And the rationalists say something like this: oh, you want to keep your marriage together? You don't want to be forcefully divorced? You're being mean. You're being bitter. You just want to enslave your spouse. You should, if you loved your spouse, you would let him go. You would let her go. This is the type of nonsense that we are now teaching today. And we're teaching this to our children. We're teaching that sex should be without commitment. We're teaching that we should have a pretend marriage that we can leave at any time and that we want to, and that nobody should be upset with us. And we've even taken it one step further. The good rationalist will say, well, any divorce, two people are involved, two people bear the blame. So you might be the spouse that says, but listen, I don't think I was a bad spouse. I was a good spouse. I loved my husband. I loved my wife. I loved my children. I want to keep this marriage intact. Oh, no, 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 you don't understand. You too are to blame. You are to blame for your husband's adultery. You are to blame for your wife's adultery. You are to blame that somehow you have fallen out of love. You're the person who might say, but I've never fallen out of love. Oh, but you're to blame that your spouse fell out of love. This is America today. Each party bears the blame. What we have actually done in America and in the state of Texas, because we are trying to repeal no-fault divorce in the state of Texas, what we have done in the state of Texas is we've said, monogamy, bye-bye. You're a relic of the past. Hello, polygamy. Now, the interesting thing about Texas is that we don't allow polygamy with a man or a woman and two spouses at the same time. We just allow it consecutively. So if I wanted to be a polygamist, I'm not allowed to have 2 or 3 or 4 wives in Texas. But what I can do is I can marry and divorce and marry and divorce and marry and divorce and marry and divorce and marry. I can practice serial polygamy rather than simultaneous polygamy. This is the hypocrisy of the Texas Family Code. And I will say this, that not only is this actually the marriage policy of the state of Texas, but to go back to one of our original oxymorons, honest divorce attorneys. Honest divorce attorneys. They will tell you this is for the good of society. This is for the good of your children. You have a right to be happy. You have a right to think only about yourself. You have a right to be selfish. You have a right to have as many spouses as you want. In fact, you also have a right to lie before a judge if you need to get out of the prison, the slavery of marriage, the drudgery of marriage. You have a right to find yourself. You have a right to abandon your children. You have a right to do all of this, and the state of Texas will always be on your side. That is what the Texas Family Code has done. Now, in the upcoming video, I will talk a little bit more about this issue of whose fault was no-fault divorce. There's a few different perspectives that we can go to with this article. Again, this article is Whose Fault Was No-Fault Divorce? The story behind America's most enduring oxymoron, no-fault divorce, honest divorce attorneys. It's written by Ryan L. McPherson. I hope you look it up and I hope you read it. Thank you.